Hi, everyone. It's Evan Fox. I want to share with you some tips on how to read a textbook. So, I have here with me a textbook from one of my classes. But you might not be taking this particular class from me, but just think about substituting the text you are taking. So, I have some notes here and some things I want to cover. And you can pause this video at any time and listen to it again or rewind it. So, we're going to talk about how a text is not the same thing as reading a novel. I'm going to talk to you about bird walks, mind wandering, how to mark your spot, how to cut your losses, how to use headlines and graphs, how to create context, think of a jigsaw puzzle, how to create meaning, think of a coat rack. Then I'm going to end with something called T-T, T-S, and T-W. T-T stands for text to text, T-S stands for text to self, and T-W stands for text to world. So let's get started. So a textbook, as many of you probably know, but you haven't had the courage to maybe allow yourself to think, I'm going to give you permission now, is not the same as reading a novel, especially a really light novel, one that doesn't take a lot of effort. So it's okay. It's okay that textbooks are different and harder for you to read. I'm just giving you that permission right now. So when you're reading a textbook, I want to give you some tips. Has this ever happened to you, or am I the only one in the world? And I hope you all don't leave me hanging. So I'm going to pick something that might be considered dry to some. It might be interesting to others. So again, allow yourself to be different from other people. I had a student tell me that a book that changed her life was her EMT book, to become an emergency medical technician. Other people, fantasy books. So remember, everybody's tastes are different. So whatever I talk to you about here, apply it to things that are hard for you. So it may not be this book. This book might be something you do find you like to read. After I got my dissertation, it was hard for me to go back to read any fiction. I could only read nonfiction. My brain was only wired for nonfiction. I could only read articles or things of research about my teaching or about the world, about being human. It was very hard. It still is very hard for me to read a novel now. So everybody's tough parts are different for them. So for me, the tips I'm giving you today, I actually should apply to myself when reading a novel. So what happens to us when we read something difficult is called a bird walk. So for example, and I'm just picking randomly here, I might read this sentence. And by the way, for some people, this amount of print could be overwhelming. So I'm going to talk to you about that as well. So here I go. A family's socioeconomic status, as discussed in Chapter 3, is its rank or position within a society based on social and economic factors, such as income, occupation, and education of the parents. Well, I have to tell you, just during that one sentence, my mind wanted to go and wander a lot. First of all, I read socioeconomic status, and I think, well, that's a big word. A lot of our readings have big words, and sometimes that slows us down as readers. And I might even think, gosh, what's wrong with you? Why don't you know more big words? And then in the meantime, my eyes are still moving across the words, but I'm now having a conversation with myself about why don't you know more words? Or let's say I do understand it. A family's socioeconomic status. Well, in my family's class, I actually am going to be sharing an article about poverty. And then I start thinking, I want to solve the problem of poverty in our country. And then I start thinking about all that I could do. And maybe I can quit my job and travel the world and try to solve poverty. Well, in the meantime, my eyes are moving over the words, but I haven't read anything or comprehended because I'm now thinking about how I'm going to save the world. income, occupation, education of the parents. Holy cow. So what good readers do is they recognize a couple things. One, they recognize when they've done it, and then they go back and they reread with no judgment. And they don't, and I want to encourage you to do this too. Don't beat yourself up. Don't say, oh, I want to go, whatever. I want to go hang with my friends. I want to go watch a movie. I want to go do my other homework, but I just have to read this again. And yeah, you do. The other thing good readers do is once they've experienced that, they recognize they're going to do this. So here's what you do. As soon as you get to the word, like, and I'm sorry, it's backwards for you, socioeconomic status, you put your finger there and stop reading. Allow yourself some bird walk time and say, okay, I want to change the world, and go through with the whole thought. Like, oh, Evan, you get to the end of the thought and realize you're not going to quit your job and you're not going to travel to India and save the poor. So, what could you do? Okay, maybe you can volunteer at your local soup kitchen or whatever. So give yourself some time. The other thing I do is I actually have a notebook. I have one on my purse and I have one on my desk, but I'm always jotting thoughts down. So as you're reading, keep a note paper, and it might be something like socioeconomic status, income, occupation. And oh my gosh, that's right. I'm having some people over for dinner and I forgot to get the kale or the chicken. Write it down. Or I need more toilet paper. Or oh my gosh, I forgot I got that homework for my biology class. Write it down, because what happens is we get distracted by all the other things, the laundry or whatever, and then it takes our attention away from our reading, our difficult reading. Any fun, yummy book, you can block the world out. I'm talking about the stuff that isn't the fun, yummy stuff in the same way. I will never say my stuff is not fun and yummy. It is, because we're learning great things. But so keep a to-do list next to you. Okay, so 2 things you've done there. One is you found your mind wandered. You want to save the world, and you forgot to read. So you go back and you reread. Or let's say you've moved beyond that and you find yourself wandering and you've marked it with your finger. You let yourself have the bird walk and then you come back. And sometimes that's enough, because it's satisfying. We didn't beat ourselves up that we're such a poor reader. The next thing good readers do, and this, I can't believe no one's ever told you this. This is the best kept secret. The next thing good readers do is if they marked it, they did their to-do list, they reread it, and still they're having trouble. Have you ever done that? You've read a paragraph 3 times and either you don't get it or it doesn't mean anything to you. Here's what good readers do, you guys. They cut their losses. Skip that paragraph, skip that page, and go on. Go on. It's okay. Trust me, it's okay. And then I'm going to come back to this part here that I'm talking about and talk to you about text to self, text to world, text to text, because I'm going to give you a really good tip. But before I do, I want you to do something else. This is what else good readers do with this kind of reading, or if it's a self-help book that you still love, But this kind of reading comes with pictures, graphs, things in bold, questions. So here's what good readers do. First of all, they'll call these things like learning objectives. Don't get hung up on the word, it sounds so highbrow. Don't. Just think of this as what's coming in the chapter, and then scan it. Don't read every word. Nobody has time. I know you're having a professor tell you that. Get your latte or your cup of tea. My son made this for me. Well, he made it for Papa, my husband, but I stole it. So get your cup of tea and sit there with these words and just scan them. Just kind of let your eyes go wherever. Ooh, and then something might hop out at you. List 6 characteristics of appropriate parenting styles. So that means something to me. It may not mean anything to you. You may be scanning and go, discuss how the socioeconomic status macro system influences parenting. Oh, socioeconomic. Maybe that means something to you. How parents and their income impact children, the relationship they have. Yeah, then Good readers do this, and this is so cool. I don't know if any of you have ever sat down and said, I'm going to read the Bible cover to cover, and you never make it past Genesis. Well, that's because of this. So you take a chapter. First of all, you may even want to go like to the very beginning and just see what is the map. If you're a map person, what's the map? Okay, we're going to do teaching. We're going to do peer groups. Just read the headlines. Mass media. Ooh, that'll be fun. Francis Ford Coppola. Oh, I love his movies. Things like that. Community. Ooh, brain briefs. Poverty linked to children's smaller brain development. Oh my gosh, I can't wait till we talk about that. So go through the whole thing like that. Scanning. Don't read word for word. Don't try to read the Bible cover to cover. Then you say, okay, where does this chapter fit in the whole scheme of things? Then this is the cool part. People need to teach the secret. I want you to go through and literally just let your eyes wander. Read anything that's in all caps, in bold, in color, any pictures, anything on the side. What does parenting encompass? Ooh, what does it mean to be a parent? Just go through the whole chapter like that. It kind of gives you a place to hang your hat. And here's the next part I wanted to talk about. When I said creating context, like a jigsaw puzzle, create meaning, hanging your hat. So I want to talk about that for a bit. When you go through and get a tour, so to speak, of your textbooks, think about when you're building a jigsaw puzzle. And I can't do them because I have a cat. He always hops up on my table. But when I do them, I do the edges first. Now, there are some people who can start in the middle with all the red or the buckets or the river, whatever. I can't. I have to have the four corners and I have to have the edges. And that's just kind of how my brain thinks. So if yours does too, this might be a good tip for you. I want you to create that context. Like, where are we going? Why does Evan want us talking about these things? I know her now well enough, and I've had some chocolate from her office to know that she's not making my life miserable. There's a reason for these questions. So think about that little tour you give yourself of your book as your jigsaw puzzle, as creating the framework for where you're going. The other really important thing, and I hope you picked up on it as I kind of gave you a tour, was that meaning. I want you to find hooks. Pretend I don't have one, but I actually, I know I'm a dork, but okay. So I have this bag for, we all have these, right? Way too many. I probably should clean them out. But think about like a coat rack. Pretend I had a coat rack there. Think of your brain this way, as these pockets for these things. And you're going through your textbook and you're finding pockets for that information. So and the way we do that is we make meaning out of it. We find what's important to us and we grab it. And so some things may not be important, like, and it's not that you don't think that poverty is bad, but maybe you've realized better than me that you can't solve poverty for the world. So you might scan those parts. I want you to go through and find the things that are meaningful to you, the things that you want to incorporate into your life that you can change or that, have meaning to you. Okay. Now, here's one way we do it. One is, you saw how I did it. I keep little lists, or I also keep a to-do list, or I let myself have my own bird walk. The other thing that great readers do, and I'm going to end with this, is they write in their books. So I know that many of you worry about selling them back, or if you're renting them, so get Post-it notes. I usually have Post-it notes here. I keep a lot of little notes over here and stuff like that. So I even get some of those hard, let's see if I've got one here. Oh yeah, here's a book that does that. I even mark with some of the hard things, hard tabs. TT, and it's written like, I'll show you my notes. T to T, T to S, T to W, T dash. Okay. Text to text, text to self, and text to world. And so as you're writing or marking and highlighting things, This research has shown when we do that, when we interact, and I'm going to use a goofy word here, when we have a relationship with our reading, we learn it better. And I'm not talking about tests and things like that. I'm talking about real learning. Because as you've noticed in my classes, all my tests are open book and untimed and everything. Because I'm more about, I want real learning to happen for you. I'm not, there's a place for memorization. I'm not saying that. Just take this part of it. So when you're interacting with the book and creating a relationship with it, saying what's important to you, this is another tool that helps. So in the margins, you can make question marks like, why do the authors think poverty is bad for children's brains? And then you can bring those questions up in our discussions or come to my office for chocolate and chat. Or maybe later on, you'll answer that question for yourself. You can put exclamation points like right on, or this is something new. I didn't know this about the brain. You can maybe even make a smiley face and say, I'm going to try this at home for whatever, different ways to talk to children or to my friends or coworkers. The other thing is text to text means, oh, I've read this somewhere else. So you can even mark that up like, oh, I remember we're talking about social relationships. And I think about Christmas Carol that Charles Dickens wrote when Ebenezer Scrooge is looking in the window, watching his nephew and wife, and they're around the piano and they're dancing and playing charades. And, that relationship is important. So you might say Charles Dickens, Christmas Story, or some other book you read, Bridge to Terabithia, reminds me of this in some way. Text to self is that stuff I was talking about with the star and the exclamation point. Like, this is meaningful to me because whatever, my grandmother was poor, or my dad was not a nice person, and so forth. And so when we, again, have that relationship, when we tie ourselves in our own lives and our own understanding into what we're reading, we learn better. And then the last thing is text to world. Like, oh yeah, so Gandhi did try to save people in poverty, and this is impacting our lives right now and our political climate. And don't get me started on that. And our political climate impacts children, and that makes me very angry. It makes me angry what's happening to people who don't have a lot of money, and they can't have a lot of money. Our world, it's very hard. And so, anyway, so see how passionate I get about that text to world. So I hope this helps you. I hope it gives you some freedom and permission to not beat yourself up. I'm not saying I don't want you to read our readings. I do. That's why I have guiding questions and discussions in our Canvas and in our classes. I want you to read it. I want you to highlight it. I want you to ask questions. I want you to make meaning. But I recognize that not everything will be meaningful to you, and some things are harder to read than others. So, especially when we talk about Brofenbrenner's, macro system, microsystem, those terms are, and I'm trying to flip through when I find it. Anyway, those kinds of things are hard. And so my job is to help make connections for you. So whenever you have a question, please come see me, call me, email me, put it in our discussion boards. And most importantly, make this reading important to you. Remember, a text is not the same as a novel for some people. For some people, it's easier for them to read text than it is novels. So just remember that difficult reading is difficult in different ways for different people. And my job is to help you. All righty. Let me know if I can help you in any other way.